Major support for Out to Lunch is provided by the law firm of Jones Walker, established in 1937 with over 375 attorneys in offices throughout the U.S., providing a comprehensive range of services to a local, national, and international client base. JonesWalker.com. And by Short & Associates, legal recruiters in Louisiana and Texas. And Orange Theory Fitness, delivering fitness results for a healthier world.
From Mansurs On The Boulevard in Baton Rouge, we're out to lunch with editor of the Baton Rouge Business Report, Stephanie Riegel. It's business, Baton Rouge style.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Riegel. Welcome to Out to Lunch. Baton Rouge is rife with talent, not just entrepreneurial and tech talent, which we focus on a lot on this show, but creative talent, artists, writers, musicians, photographers. What makes someone talented? Is it innate? Or does training and hard work play a role? And how important is it for someone with a talent in the arts to express himself and share his works with the rest of the world? How important is it that the rest of the world recognizes the artist's genius? Joining me at the table today is an artistic genius who needs no introduction in Baton Rouge, nature photographer CC Lockwood, whose sublime images of Louisiana's lush landscapes, moss-laden oaks, endangered wildlife, and fragile ecosystem have earned him international acclaim and a place in the hearts of so many. CC has not limited himself to Louisiana. He's also done extensive work in the American West, but it is for his local wildlife photography that he is best known, and his later books have called attention to the crisis of vanishing Gulf Coast wetlands and efforts by organizations like the Nature Conservancy to restore them. CC has dozens of published books of his work, and he leads workshops of like-minded souls who want to learn to capture through the images of the beauty of nature around them. Is it something that can be taught? CC, we'll look forward to hearing how you got into the field and what your thoughts are on what it takes to take beautiful pictures. Welcome to Out to Lunch.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Joining me and CC at the table today is a man of many talents in his own right. Randy Roussel, one of the most respected real estate and corporate attorneys in the state and a partner at Phelps Dunbar. Randy has established a successful career over the past 30 years in Baton Rouge, a career many would envy. But Randy's true passion is photography, and he has conveyed his love for South Louisiana, and specifically the River Parishes where he grew up, through gorgeous images that might make CC, who actually has taught workshops that Randy has attended, proud. Randy has published 2 books of his photographs, and a third, a combination of essays about his family and life along the Mississippi River, combined with his photographs, will come out later this year. Randy, welcome to Out to Lunch.
Thank you.
Well, CC, you're known for so many things, but especially for your images of wildlife in Louisiana, which tell the story of such a beautiful, fragile, disappearing ecosystem. You're not native to Louisiana, though. You came here, I believe, to go to LSU in the late 1960s. How did you become so enamored of this place, and what made you want to stay?
Well, basically, I found out my mother couldn't cook when I came to LSU. No,
So it was the
she
food,
served us
huh?
healthy meals, but I learned that food had flavor down here, and I just totally fell in love with LSU and all my friends, and learned to be a photographer at that time.
Okay, so how did you learn? Did you study it at LSU, or?
I actually tried to be the Reveille photographer about my senior year, and they wouldn't hire me because I didn't know how to develop film.
No.
So I taught myself to develop film, got a 35 millimeter camera, and came back my last semester and shot every day. So that really helped to shoot and develop every day.
Now, taking new style photographs is very different than what you ended up doing. How did that evolution?
Well, I grew up hunting, fishing, camping in Arkansas and the Ozarks and those clear, rapid-filled streams. So I got out of LSU in finance after being in architecture, pre-med, accounting, and art. Still in 4 years, though. And just decided to be a nature photographer, and just had to.
Been doing it ever since.
Ever since, yes.
Was it hard to parlay it into a career? I mean, something where you could actually support yourself on your photographs?
Well, it took a while to learn. There wasn't any how-to books back then. There wasn't workshops to go to. I was one of the first. There was, I think, 3 men in America that were making a living as nature photographers, and I wrote them letters and asked them, but that's the only help I got.
Did they help you?
They helped a little. Lynn LaRue up in New Jersey was very helpful, and he's published a lot of books, a great photographer, and he was one of my mentors in that early age. My first few years really didn't have that many great images, but with practice and being there is my secret. They say in the business sense you should spend 80% of your time in the office selling pictures and 20% shooting, but I do it about the opposite. I love being out there.
That's great. That's the formula to your success, I would imagine. That's wonderful. Well, Randy, you have a successful career as an attorney, a career that a lot of people would probably kill for, but you love taking pictures also, and you probably wish you could spend 80% of your time waiting for that right image out in the wilderness.
Right. It's a hobby that's occupied a lot of time. One thing about practicing law is it's very intense, it's very detail-oriented. Typically, you're on the phone, conference calls, you're working on documents, you're looking at a computer screen. So to achieve a balance, it's like to get outside and ride bike, runs. But then when you're doing this, you experience the beautiful Louisiana climate. So it started to capture those moments in time. I started photographing those, and that's sort of been a combination of exercise as well as relaxation from the routine of practicing law.
Sure. And you've taken many workshops and classes to try to improve your technique. You're basically self-taught with help from people like CC Lockwood?
I started self-taught. I've taken several of CC's workshops and been very, very helpful. I also went to a workshop in Santa Fe that was conducted by an editor for National Geographic, who the focus of that is of the various images that you take, the 1,000 that you end up with, how do you determine which ones are really the better ones and which ones tell the story you're trying to tell. I also went to a workshop in Maine, Maine Media. Mm-hmm. That workshop was more in using your photographs to tell stories. So some of them were technical in terms of technique, and some of them were technical in terms of subject matter, framing, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Now that everybody thinks that they're a photographer because they have iPhones, and even before the iPhone, though, digital cameras, what makes a really good photographer from just a really good iPhone owner?
Well, there's the two workshops he just mentioned in Maine and Albuquerque, Santa Fe, are very important. And I try to tell my students, you got to throw away the bad ones, learn what the good ones are, and especially just don't show your bad ones to people. And not only it clutters up your computer these days, and it used to clutter up your slide files, your negative files, it's, you're making yourself look bad if you show them, well, this would have been better if I did this. No, you don't even need to show that. And to tell a story, that's important. My first meeting with the head of photography at National Geographic, when I got my assignment to do the Atchafalaya, he said there's plenty of good photographers, but very few good ideas. So getting the ideas, editing your work down to the best is the secret.
And you did shoot for National Geographic for many years? Just special projects now and then?
A freelance photographer for them, and I did four magazine stories and a lot of pictures in their books and children's magazines on the side. And that was a great feather in my cap and also a learning experience to work with those people.
Those are the best in the world, huh?
Yeah, they really are.
What is the business model for photographers today? I mean, how do you make money at it?
Well, in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, I had a flow from teaching workshops, from selling images to magazines, having stock agents that sold images for me, plus selling designer prints and limited edition prints in galleries. And since everybody has an iPhone, and most of the magazines and stuff are using more free pictures and donated pictures, so that's kind of a flow. So many people of my group are teaching more workshops and doing picture books and not worrying about the magazine sales.
Mm-hmm. And you have a gallery also.
I do, both at the Backpacker on Jefferson Highway, and I have a new little gallery, the Lockwood Gallery North in St. Francisville behind the Magnolia Cafe.
And do you sell a lot of works through that, or is it more just exposure and branding?
I've sold a lot of posters, books, prints, cards, and limited edition prints over the years and still do.
Mm-hmm. Randy, how is he as a teacher? Is he good? Were his workshops effective? What did you...
So, on the business side, I always appreciate people who are photographers full-time, because practicing law, I make money with my photography, but it's not required to support my my life and my lifestyle. I do realize that it's very difficult because everybody's a photographer now. Everybody has a digital camera. Everybody has an iPhone. A lot of images are shared online, so the desire to buy your image and put it on the wall is not as great because they'll just download it and keep it on their tablet or whatever. So being aware of that, you do have to find your niche in what message, what is your market, where do you want to go, how much time and resource do you want to put into that, like publishing a book. The 2 books I had, I self-published. So you have to front the dollars for graphic design, for printing, various things in the process, and then hope you can price it at a level and that you're able to sell it and make money.
And you have sold them.
Yeah, I've sold out on the first 2 books.
That's great. But that's a luxury that a young photographer just getting started wouldn't have, right? Necessarily.
Right.
I mean, if they didn't have their own full-time successful
you have to be
law
willing
firm.
to front the money and get the returns on the back. Now, some people will sell their books to a publishing company and they'll get a royalty. I've been told that the business model on that is not very strong for the photographer, the artist, unless you're really well known, because your royalties will be based on a certain price per book. And if you're printing 1,000 books, the economics is the same as if you're printing 20,000 or 50,000 books.
Right. Do you have a regular publisher, CC?
Yeah, I've been using LSU Press since my first book, and they do a wonderful job. And it's a hard business, and there's so many books out there and so many people looking at their iPads and iPhones rather than buying books. So it's a little tougher to sell them, but they do bigger editions and get the cost down and sell a lot of books of mine.
You're listening to Out to Lunch. I'm Stephanie Riegel. We're talking to wildlife photographer CC Lockwood and attorney Randy Roussel. We'll be right back after this very short break. You're listening to Out to Lunch. I'm Stephanie Riegel. We're talking to wildlife photographer CC Lockwood and attorney Randy Roussel. CC, you said something a little while ago that I had wanted to ask you about, and it was the importance of having a good idea. When you're out there on the Atchafalaya or on the River Road or some beautiful iconic spot in South Louisiana, what do you look for that's different, that we haven't seen a million times in maybe very beautiful but cliched photographs? How do you find something different every time?
There's just about everything's been photographed in nature. I mean, the ivory-bill woodpecker is probably extinct, so it hadn't since 1943, I believe. So you just have to get it in better light, but then present it in a book or a magazine story or a gallery show that tells the story better than somebody else, because there's a million pictures of a big, beautiful white-tailed deer buck
Right.
with 8, 10, 12-point antlers. But you have to just take yours as good as the rest and present it in a way if you want to make a living off of it like I do.
So with my photography, I'm trying to do 2 things. One is create a sense of place and show that this area of the River Parishes is very different from any other place that you may go to. It's not the same as Southwest Louisiana. It's not the same as Monroe or Shreveport. And also I'm trying to tell a story and connect the various photographs together. So I think what makes some of my photographs different than somebody else's is the elements that I use to tell the story, that and how they connect together. So one photograph by itself may just be an iconic image, but the 12 images you piece together tell a story in a consistent way, and that's what makes it unique.
Do you know when you're sitting there, aha, I got it, and you click the shutter? You know that was it?
I do. You get that. That's a good way to describe it. Aha, I got it.
That aha moment.
And there's, when I take people on workshops to places I've been hundreds of times, sometimes I don't take as many pictures as they do because I've been there and
Right.
I've done that. And until that shaft of light comes magically through the trees, I might just have my camera sitting around my neck. But I want them to take and practice and see.
Well, Well, let's switch gears for just a minute. This is a part of the show that we call Another Great Idea. So maybe you have a friend who's always has a great idea for you. They tell you about a job you should have applied for, or somebody you have to meet and have a cup of coffee with, or a great investment opportunity, and maybe you take the advice and it turns out well, or you follow their advice and it turns out really bad. Can you think of a situation that you've ever had like that? Did you follow your friend's advice, and how did it turn out?
I got a good one for that.
Okay.
Claudette Price was the bookseller at Godshaw's and later Maison Blanche, and ended up as the marketing woman for LSU Press. And I was there. In fact, she sold more of my first Atchafalaya book than all the other bookstores combined. She was a seller. So anyway, we were there 20 or 30 times over years, and we'd always talk books and ideas. And she said the Mississippi River. And I never would have thought. I mean, I was in the swamps or the Rocky Mountains or the Grand Canyon. And finally, I took her advice, and I got in a raft and floated down the whole Mississippi, and it's one of my most successful books, and really a delightful experience to see the middle of America from top to bottom.
And you sailed the whole thing on a raft? Or on a boat? I mean,
2,410 miles, 20 miles.
Wow, I bet that was wonderful. What year was this?
1997.
Okay.
And she also said I ought to do a cookbook, but I hadn't done that yet. So.
Fantastic. What about you, Randy?
I took a photo New Orleans workshop. Once a year they have an annual program, and they bring in speakers from around the country. And you're supposed to present body of work. It's one of the first times I ever heard the term body of work and actually tried to present something consistently. So I had all the iconic images of, the plantations, the oak trees, the river, the things you always see. And Sig Harvey was the teacher, and she said, well, there's a reason you go to this color or this object, but you need to identify a deeper meaning in where they are. So they're just not like everybody else's photograph. And so she created what she called a mind map, where you kind of create a grid of what you're seeing and how it relates to the story you're trying to tell, and then you create this grid of what's out there, and then you go back and relook at things and try to connect stuff together. So that's really a good way to organize your thoughts,
very much.
And also a way to take your 1,000 images down to 200 really good images and tell that consistent story. It's not all just, a good part of it is sitting out there and taking the photographs, enjoying nature, being outside. That's the fun part of it. But putting some structure into what you're trying to accomplish is the harder part, but I think it takes you to the next level.
Mm-hmm. What do y'all think it is about Louisiana that is so attractive to people who love to tell stories, whether through words or pictures or paintings? Arkansas is very beautiful. You, Randy, have a place in North Carolina that's very beautiful, but is there something special about Louisiana, South Louisiana?
Well, it took me a while to figure it out. I am a nature boy. I love being out there and being in nature. And in the 70s and 80s, I was fighting to save the Atchafalaya and the Gulf Coast and for the alligators and the porpoises. But I finally figured it out. I stayed here during college because I love the people, and the people are so interesting, and especially the South Louisiana folks that grew up in the marsh and got the good food, the music, and just friendly people out on the bayou. And I think that attracts everyone worldwide.
And you think it's different than in other places, really?
I think so. It really is.
I agree with CC, and also there are so many different cultures that have come to New Orleans and through New Orleans to the rest of the state. It's a port city. It one time was, the third largest city in the United States. So you ended up with German, French, Spanish, Caribbean, African, all these different cultures, and everybody blended at some level but kept their cultures independent at another, and it just creates a very, very interesting environment, which I don't think you find in most places.
Yeah, I think that's an important part that probably a lot of people don't realize. They say the food is great, but I think that's one reason why, right?
And all the festivals, every culture brought their own festival here, and we celebrate all the festivals.
Yeah.
So you have Mardi Gras, St. Joseph's Day, just St. Patrick's Day. You just go
On
on.
and on.
Like every weekend, it seems like there's another festival, and a lot of them are based on the cultures from the people who came here.
No, that's a good point.
And alligators.
And
They fascinate everybody. And in my first dealings in the 70s with editors at Smithsonian, National Geographic, National Wildlife, they know about wildlife, but they sit in an office in Washington, D.C., and New York City. And you really have alligators in your backyard? And I said, well, when I lived on the houseboat, I did, for sure. But in Baton Rouge, I don't.
I know your work involved with organizations, the conservation organizations, and trying to call attention to the plight of our eroding coastline has been so significant. We've made some progress, but not enough. This must trouble you when you go out there, and are you still working, advocating for this?
Oh, yeah, it's the Gulf Coast of Louisiana, the coastal regions worldwide are very important to just the whole chain of life. I mean, there's just so much, from extra marsh slowing down a hurricane wave hitting New Orleans to the seafood to the recreation. Get the natural resources out of there. So it's very important, and it's a tough battle. And I recognized it in 1974 with some LSU coastal scientists. They told me we were out in Chaffly Bay, and they said, we're accreting land out here. And I said, well, why is that special? Because we're sinking every place else. And we've been fighting it, and it's going to take a lot of
And
money.
back in 1974, people were not hearing that message.
The governors and the legislature didn't believe it until they finally got aerial photographs, and they showed, look how it was, look how it is, and this is what's going to happen. And they finally believe it, and everybody's on the believing side at least, but it's a real technical, difficult, expensive problem to solve.
Yeah. And they refuse to believe that climate change has anything to do with causing it. But that's another story. We won't talk about that. What advice would y'all give to young photographers who are maybe trying to make a living at it? Is there a pathway to really be able to support yourself today as a photographer?
Hard work. I mean, there's plenty out there, and like I said, there was 3 when I started. I joined NAMPTA, which is the North American Nature Photographer Association. And the last time I went to a meeting, they said 1,600 people were claiming that they made their total living off photography.
Wow.
So to jump in to that with the same number of magazines and bookstores out there, you just have to work hard and get beautiful images and put them together right.
And the other, this is one of the lessons I learned at one of the workshops, and they did talk about how do you make a living out of photography, and they had this very, very talented landscape photographer. And she went through 30 of her best images and then explained to us how many times she sold these images and how much she got, she received payment, and then said, I really make my money being a wedding photographer. Mm-hmm. And my niche has been to put the wedding couples in these fabulous backgrounds, but without being willing to do some commercial aspects that are maybe not as glamorous as going out in the Chaffly for a week and getting those perfect images, but being willing to do some of those tasks of, like, taking corporate jobs that are more routine, not as artistic, and incorporating that into your career is very important, to be willing to do that.
Yeah, I mean, would you even advise a young person to try to be a CC Lockwood today? Like, I'm wondering if the market can even support it. Or, like Randy says, you take a corporate job and do that on the side, and maybe you get lucky.
Oh, yeah. Well, I did it the other way. I started right out of college at 21, where I was living in the back of my station wagon. And, gas was cheap, food was cheap, film was cheap. And I just didn't spend enough until I developed enough inventory to present it to magazines, and I mean, that's how I got started, selling to magazines first, and then I finally got my National Geographic article and my first book, and just went on from there. So you either need to get a job to support yourself, or you need to just go camp out and live on the cheap until you get your inventory up.
Yeah. What do you all, think about Baton Rouge as a place to live and work and do business? I mean, what do we need more of here to foster a creative class, to make it easier for people to maybe pursue a passion like photography as a career or even just as a hobby? Or are we doing everything right?
Well, it's, I've lived in Baton Rouge for probably half of my 45 years since college, and on houseboats, and now I live up north of St. Francisville. But it was fine for me. I mean, there could be more galleries and more art walks and more bookstores, like there used to be a lot of bookstores. But there's plenty of creative people here. I mean, just so many I've met over the years in all aspects of the creative arts. It's maybe not a Greenwich Village or the art district in New Orleans, but it's plenty here to develop a talent.
That's good to hear.
I agree. I think you have to go out and find these communities of people who are interested in photography or the type of work that you're doing. And if you work at it and you dedicate the time to it, you can find a community of creative people, and you can find places to display your work, different events that go around town. But people aren't going to approach you to say, give me your 5 images and I'm going to put in this gallery. You have to make the effort to find out where the galleries are, what their vision is for their gallery, what displays are available, what festivals are going on, and make that effort. And if you make that effort, you're connected.
Wonderful stories. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for, but CC Lockwood and Randy Roussel, you all are doing beautiful things to make our community a better place and to help show people what South Louisiana has to offer. So thanks so much for sharing your stories today and for being with me on Out to Lunch.
Enjoyed it immensely.
Thank you.
My guests today on Out to Lunch have been CC Lockwood and Randy Roussel. You can find out more about CC Lockwood and Randy Roussel by following the links on our website. It's batonrouge.la and wrkf.org. Today's show was recorded live over lunch at Mansurs on the Boulevard in Baton Rouge. Mansurs is open for lunch daily from 11 to 2, for dinner nightly, and for brunch on Saturdays and Sundays. The producer of our show is Grant Morris. Our technical producer is Eric Merle. Our associate producer is Peter Raschuti. And our Baton Rouge business consultants are Charlie D'Agostino and Ann Edelman. You can see photos from this show on itsbatonrouge.la and on our Facebook page. All the music on Out to Lunch is composed and performed by Mitchell Foreman. You can find more of Mitchell's music wherever great jazz is streamed or sold and at mitchellforeman.com. You can get this show as a podcast, you can listen to past shows, and you can keep up with us on all kinds of social media by going to our websites, itsbatonrouge.la and wrkf.org. Out to Lunch is a production of INO Broadcasting for itsbatonrouge.la and WRKF 89.3 FM. I'm Stephanie Riegel. Thanks for joining me. I look forward to meeting you again next week around the table here at Mansurs for more business Baton Rouge style on Out to Lunch.
Out to Lunch Baton Rouge is recorded live over lunch at Mansurs on the Boulevard in Baton Rouge. Mansurs is open for lunch daily 11 to 2, for dinner nightly, and for brunch on Saturdays and Sundays. Mitchell Foreman wrote and performs all the music on Out to Lunch. You can hear Mitchell's music anywhere great jazz is sold or streamed, and at mitchellforeman.com. Major support for Out to Lunch is provided by the law firm of Jones Walker, established in 1937 with over 375 attorneys in offices throughout the U.S., providing a comprehensive range of services to a local, national, and international client base. JonesWalker.com. And by Short & Associates, legal recruiters in Louisiana and Texas. And Orange Theory Fitness, delivering fitness results for a healthier world.